Howdy, folks. I'm joined by Craig from Voices of the Left podcast, and I'm really happy to have you on, man. I one thing I want to say before I forget, before we actually get into our topic or anything else, is that I first ran across you because you were a guest on the Left Wing podcast, and that was a fun time and everything. And I followed you. Actually, I didn't follow you on Instagram for a while after that because your Instagram was dystopian grift, and I didn't recognize
Yeah.
the handle. But then later on, I saw another Instagram account, and it was linked to you as well, and I was very happy to see it. And it was called "Sub Rides for Capitalists," which
Yes. Yeah.
which which I can't remember the last time I laughed that hard by looking at an Instagram handle. So bravo on that one,
Awesome.
man. Congratulations.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Yeah, it was good to be on that on the left wing for sure. And yeah, it's so hard tracking people across social media because like sometimes it's obvious, right, that they're gonna have the same handle, but like I didn't feel like making a new handle for the show because a bunch of people already knew me, were already following me at that old one. So I was just like, I'll just leave it
Yeah, I get
and
it.
we'll see what happens.
It
But
you know
yeah,
what's really unfortunate is that when you're on social media and there's content creators that you like and you follow and everything, but you know their faces, but you don't know their name, either their,
sure.
username or their real name. So if they just disappeared one day, like if their account gets banned or something, you will never
Right.
find them again. Well, I mean, maybe you will,
Yep.
but there's no guarantee. And that makes you really sad. I didn't realize that
Yeah.
till like earlier this year, or I guess last year, last summer, I went through my following list and a bunch of them were just gone. And I had no
Hmm.
idea who they were. And I was like, oh man, that's kind of sad. I wish I could have, I should start writing these people's names down, So we talked about,
Right.
organizing and everything, but I wanted to get into, your background and learn a little bit about you. I like to do that first before we actually start talking the topic and make it a little
Sure.
more personal and everything. So
Sure.
I saw a lot of stuff that you had posted and written and everything, and you seem to be really big into like union organizing and Marxism in general. And I watched one video you posted a while back. It was on deconstruction from Christianity, which that's
Hmm.
right in my
Yeah.
wheelhouse. I talk about that all the time.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
so tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you grew up, and how you got into politics.
Sure. So I grew up in the Madison, Wisconsin area, and still went to school in state and just kind of haven't left, as far as where I live. I've traveled a lot when I was a kid because my parents were teachers. So they had a lot of time off in the summer. So I got to see a lot of the United States, which helped, help me, shape who I was, right? Help me understand, we used to go to national parks and state parks and stuff like that. So just helped me become a more well-rounded person in that regard. Um, and it wasn't too long after college and I got out in the workforce in general, which has been 20 years ish now, which is hurts to say
It
sometimes,
do,
but
don't it?
whatever.
It do. Yeah.
It's just the way it goes. Um, I just kind of realized that you know, even 20 years ago, I was just like, this something isn't right here, right? Like people are being taken advantage of, and like it was right around the time the Bush v. Gore election happened, right? And Gore just got hosed by the Supreme Court, of course. Um, so it was that kind of made me start thinking about what's actually going on, and like then I just pretty much started paying attention from there, not as much as I do now. So I was still just a dumb kid, like in my mid 20s at the time, but I you can just look around now, and I look around, and I just even before COVID, but like once COVID hit, like that really opened up my eyes to and I like the things that are truly important in life. At least what I consider it is that everyone living their best life possible. And we saw what COVID did, um, and you realize people aren't, and they not some some can't live their best life possible because of what we have going on in our political system in the United States in particular.
Yeah.
So it just was kind of like learning about the Supreme Court. A lot of their cases are just terrible. They have just awful just views of stuff. They make shit up like um what is it? The qualified immunity thing. That's a
Yep.
made up thing that the Supreme Court made up to protect police. Uh, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff they've just
Oh
made up
yeah.
and legislated from the bench, and then complain that happens when something good comes out of
Yeah, right.
something
Yeah.
good comes out of someone legislating from the bench. At any rate, so I could babble on for hours about this, but it's that type of thing. Just seeing people just being taken advantage of. So
Yeah.
it just kind of, and you look at like the laws that get passed, um, you know, to me, yes, it's good to look at what laws get passed, but it's also good to look at which laws are voted against and by whom, right?
Mhm.
Because there are good laws that can't get passed because people vote against them for whatever reason, usually bigotry and money. But that's, at least in the last 10 years anyway, that's what's been going on. I realize
Yeah.
it's been going on longer than that, but like it's been heightened.
More concentrated that you see. I want to talk about the Supreme Court real quick that you mentioned it. It is
Sure.
funny that conservatives complain about activist judges. No, they love activist judges. They just like it when it's on their
Oh,
side. Yeah, obviously.
right. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
it's kind of like when they complain about big government, but they support the
yeah.
military, they support cops, they support, welfare for corporations. They love big government.
Right.
They just don't like, money going to certain people. That's when they have a problem with it.
Right.
And you mentioned the
Yeah.
Supreme Court. So my favorite is the wrong word, but one of the most fascinating, just bullshit, absurd rulings from the Supreme Court. I can't remember the name of it, but I remember watching this video years ago, back in the Facebook days. And there was this lady who was driving through Texas, and she got stopped at like a checkpoint, on an interstate somewhere. And
Okay.
the border patrol was there, and they asked her for documentation to prove she was a U.S. citizen. And she said,
Hmm.
"What? Why are you asking me for this?" And they said, "Well, we just want to check to see if you're a citizen." She says, "Did I do anything wrong?" "No, this is just a random checkpoint to see if you're a citizen." She said, "Fuck you! I'm not doing it." I was like,
Yeah.
why? And so like she asked to talk to the supervisor. Supervisor came out and said, "Yeah, we can do this." They went through like 3 levels of border patrol, and they all said the same thing. "Yeah, we have every right to do this." She's like, "No, I'm not doing it." I looked it up.
Hmm.
They do have that right. They do.
Really?
Yes, right. I was
Jeez.
stunned. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And it's a Supreme Court decision. It's either 1968 or 1978. I can't remember. It's one of the two.
Hmm.
But the Supreme Court ruling says that U.S. Border Patrol can stop anybody for any reason and check their immigration or their citizenship status as long as they're within 100 miles of a border. Now, I read that. I said, "You've got to be shitting me.
Yeah.
100 miles from a border." And
That's a
then
long ways.
that's a long fucking way, man. And I looked into it
Yeah.
because there's a lot of sites about this. If you look at a map and you like draw 100 miles around the north, south, and east border, it's two
Hmm.
thirds of the United States that's covered by
Is
that
it
100,
really?
or maybe one third, probably one third. One third of the United States
One
is
third.
covered by this
Yeah.
border. 100 miles, man.
Jeez.
Look, I'm not saying I'd be a fan of it, but I can see if you had this rule, like, I don't know, 10 miles from the border. Like, okay, all right, fine. If you have to have this rule, I get it. 100 is bananas, man. And so the
Yeah.
Supreme Court does insane
That's
shit, right? It doesn't sound
it's
real. Like, it doesn't
yeah.
sound real, but
Yeah.
that's
It
it.
sounds fake. Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
A Supreme Court actually said, "Yeah, 100 miles sounds reasonable." Migrants with no shoes walking through, yeah, they can make it 100 miles just fine. It's crazy. Uh, my ears perked up. I don't know if I mentioned this or if you mentioned this on the show when you said you were from Madison, Wisconsin, because I went to college in
Hmm.
Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I went to it's kind of embarrassing. I went to this Christian college in the middle of nowhere at Watertown, Wisconsin. It's like 45 minutes from
Yeah.
Madison. And
Yeah. I know where Watertown is. Yeah.
okay, yeah, and so that's where I went to school. And when you
Right.
mentioned that you were the kid of teachers, my ears perked up as well because I
Yeah.
remember the Scott Walker stuff going on in Wisconsin right around that
Hmm.
time. Like I think it was like
Yep.
right after college, like 2006 or 7, somewhere around there for me. Maybe a little bit. I don't remember, it was somewhere around there, maybe a little bit later. But I can't imagine your folks were big fans of Governor Walker.
No, and my dad was down there protesting.
Oh,
He
I
was
love
one
it.
of
I
the he
love it.
was one of the
Well,
folks
tell
down there.
people what
Yeah.
we're talking about before we go. Yeah, if
Yeah.
nobody knows.
So what we're talking about is Act 10, and that was a law put in place by Scott Walker, former governor of Wisconsin, in like 2010, 2011, like almost immediately after he became governor. He put it in place, and what it did, it's many pages. I think it's like 1,000 some pages, but the main thing it did was strip union protections from public employees. So like all the nurses at the UW Health, which is a huge hospital in Madison, all of a sudden didn't have the right to collect a bargain anymore. They could still be in a union, but they couldn't collect a bargain. And there were some other things that happened too that were part of it that I can't even remember anymore. It just makes me so mad because it's like obvious. It's an obvious grift from the right to destroy, people's power to have better working conditions and more money.
It
Like
It was
horrible.
pandemonium, man. I wasn't in
Yeah.
Wisconsin
Yep.
anymore at the time, but I still had friends there, and I saw video and stuff. Like people were protesting around the Capitol, in the Capitol,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if it didn't wreck Scott Walker's career technically because he still served for a while after that. He was still a popular figure in the
Yeah.
Republican Party, but it
Mm-hmm.
ruined, I think, any chance that he had of like national popularity as in running for because he ran for president at least once or something like that,
Yep.
and
Mm-hmm.
that kind of
Yep.
stuff. It had to have destroyed any credibility he had from that point forward.
Yeah, pretty much. And he basically just did the bidding of the Koch brothers. Like that's what he did.
There
And,
was
the state Republican Party was just on, is obviously on board with it. So,
wasn't there a video or like a recording someone had pretending to be one of the Koch brothers started talking to Scott Walker? Do you remember that? I remember like this thing that came
I
out that someone was, but okay, it's kind
I
of niche, but
don't.
it was a wild thing I was
Yeah,
talking
I
about.
don't.
But I
But
Scott Walker and Rick Santorum were like the two people that I just despised the most in those days, and
yeah. Yep.
it's I couldn't stand either of them, and they they're like a weird example of imagine like Trump with no charisma, like like all the evil
Sure.
practicality, but none of the charm at
Yeah.
all. That's who they were.
Mhm.
Like they were just like demons doing the obvious bidding of
Yep.
corporate interests to screw over people. And look, it made them popular like with
Yep.
the Fox News circuit, but your regular people,
Yeah.
like yeah, this seemed really off-putting.
Yeah. It's made it a deeper color purple state, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, I
um
love it. I
just
love it.
because people that might have been on the right and were just like, hey, just enjoying being in a union, making more money than you do if you're not in a union, and having good bennies and all that, which you can't discount. All of a sudden they got that taken away from them in a sense, and that probably pushed them maybe a little farther left, maybe not, maybe they still don't care, but at least more people started voting, I think,
It
at
couldn't
the
have
very
created
least.
more right wingers. That's the thing. Because like it's
Right.
funny whenever I mean you guys all know conservatives love to shit on college every chance they get. They always talk
All
about
the
how
time.
college turns people into liberals and everything. And they're kind of right, it does, but not for the reasons they think,
Right.
they
Yeah, yeah,
think.
yeah. They're
And
accidentally right.
yeah, like they pretend that there's some sort of, secret club of college professors that sit around like, all right, we got another batch of 18-year-olds coming in. Can't wait to turn
Yep.
them into Leninists. It's like, no, that's
Yeah.
that's not how this fucking works, man.
It's
You
not what's happening.
no, you by the way, it's funny, it's like, did you ever have any Marxist professors? Like how many Marxist professors did you
Uh-uh.
have? Yeah, like
I didn't have any that I'm aware of.
exactly. That's the funny thing too. Like you
Yeah,
might
none.
run across one Marxist professor in 4 years. It's not like it's a common
Right.
thing. But the reason people
Right.
turn become liberal in college isn't because of some coordinated plan. It's because of a few things. One is you get out of your hometown and you meet other
Yep.
people from across the state, across the country, hell, across the world. And you find out
Right.
about different cultures and you realize, oh, the way they've been doing things in Possum Dick, Arkansas for my entire life and for my parents' entire life isn't necessarily the right way to go. And then
Right.
more importantly, you learn more. And the more
Yeah.
you learn, the less conservative you become. Like that is
Right.
a stone cold, ironclad fact of life. Even amongst conservatives, the conservatives who are more educated are not as conservative as the less educated ones. That's just how this works. And they
Sure.
get terrified. Anyway, the point of this is that they always say that, don't go to college. What you need to do is like, go out and get yourself a good union job and a trade. So they
Yeah.
realize unions are good that way. But then when you start talking about the power of unions, like, oh, I don't know, that's not cool. My union's good, but the rest of them, oh, I don't know. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
weird. So like when Walker goes out, he's openly speaking out against unions. Yeah, a lot of conservatives still like support their union, but are conservatives. But there's no way he created more conservatives by doing that.
Right. Right. For sure. It's funny you brought up the having Marxist professors. Like, I went to a school in like central Wisconsin, but like they and I minored in philosophy, not even in there did I have, we didn't even deal with that. It was all just like main philosophy stuff, like epistemology and, you know, other stuff like that. It didn't have anything to do with like political philosophy or anything. So, you know, how had at the if knowing what I know now, if I went back and talked to those guys, I'm sure I could have had, you know, I'm sure they were aware of it, right, and would have been able to talk about it, but it was never even brought up ever.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny, like what a boogeyman they've made college. I don't know, but um, speaking of speaking with your fellow man, I wanted to go into a little segment about um, human empathy and everything. And I thought of this
Sure.
because of the name of your other account, Sub Rise for Capitalists, because it's hard for me to think of another moment in the United States when there was such unity and such like just like dark and uproarious joy at the fate
Right.
of these assholes that spent all this money
Yep.
to in a tuna can to go see the Titanic only to be crushed by the wrath of Poseidon. Like it was, I always
Right.
refer to it
Yeah, yeah.
as like the submarine incident was like September 12th but good. That's how I refer to it, is that
Sure.
we were all just
Sure.
united in joy and mockery.
Yeah.
But every
Yep.
now and again, you'd run across someone who'd say, "Hey, being a wet blanket, you shouldn't, be shitting on these. These are dead people right there." And thankfully, most people were like, "Go fuck yourself. This is funny. Like, we're gonna laugh at it,
Exactly.
and you can't stop me."
Right.
And it did give me.
Yep.
It's like what bothered me about it the most is that okay, now you're deciding that we're being too cruel, that we're too mean,
Yeah.
that we're too selfish.
Yeah.
Have you seen the world lately? Like where there are
Right.
wars going on all the time, sexual assaults,
Mm-hmm.
murders. It's chaos,
Yep.
and like especially with capitalism that depends on the exploitation of the working class, on having people
Yeah.
homeless, our healthcare
Yep.
system, like people can't go to the hospital or they
Right.
they put off going to the hospital until they die. That cruelty you don't give a fuck about. But the fact that these
Right.
5 random dudes are dead, now all of a sudden,
Yeah.
you're giving me the boo-hoos, and I don't
Right.
understand that at all.
Yeah. Well, you know, and what was especially, so a couple things about that. It was especially interesting to me about the people that were saying that, for sure, 100% right up what you were saying. Now you care, right? But it's like you don't even know these people.
Yeah. Yeah. If this was your
And
cousin,
if
I'd
they
get it.
saw,
Yeah.
right, and if you saw them on the street, they would ignore you.
Yep.
Like it's, you know, the only one you might have a little bit of empathy for is the kid,
The kid. Yeah.
right?
True.
Like, but even still, it's like, you know, okay, on the surface, it's like, all right, yeah, people died. That sucks. Right. But when you start looking at why they died,
Yeah, I know.
and you looked at every corner that was cut by the guy that built the sub was cut. He ignored all the experts he had test it. He made it out of material he shouldn't have made it of. And they told him it like, hey, that creaking sound on the test rides, like that creaking sound is the sub getting ready to implode. Like, well, that's what we have this warning system for. And they were just like, that's just gonna go off right before it blows up. You're screwed once that happens. Like the whole thing, like it just like validated everybody that
It.
was like happy about it, right? Because it's not like it's not a tragedy.
Yeah.
It was a preventable thing, and the guy ignored it because of hubris. And
Yeah.
you know, that guy's not the I don't even remember the guy's name
I don't
anymore,
remember
but
his name either.
he's not a working class guy. He inherited his money from his parents. And like I remember looking it up. It's weird. I can't remember. It was only 6 months ago, but
Yeah, I know.
whatever the case is, it's like, you know, you can't like
It, yeah, it
it's
it
just
wasn't
hard.
it wasn't a tragedy. It was a predictable outcome based upon the previous actions. Like that's what it was.
Right.
And
Yeah. Yep.
my favorite thing about this are the pictures. Like the pictures of this piece of shit. And uh
Yeah.
you go, I don't have to describe you. You guys know what I'm talking about. You see him there with this tiny little thing. It's just like surrounded by in this
Mm-hmm.
metal cylinder. And did you see the pictures of James Cameron's submarine that he took to the Titanic? Like, 10 years, 15 years before that? Like,
Yeah.
it looks like a spaceship. Like it cost
Right.
like
Yeah.
$10 million he put into this thing.
Right.
It only sat one person, and he had screens and he had controls. Like it looked like something out of Star Trek because he didn't
Right.
cut corners. He gave a
Yeah.
shit.
Because you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's like, I'm gonna make sure I don't die down there in the
Yeah. He
Titanic. And
wanted to make it back.
yeah, I'm gonna spend the
Yeah.
money I need to make this work. And what blows me away is that we always talk about how, rich CEOs and, bosses will cut corners and they don't care if it puts the lives of their workers at risk. Turns out they don't care if it puts their lives at risk either. That's the
Right.
wild part. Like, it's like,
Right.
it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing that really irked me the most was the fact that both Canada, the United States, probably some other governmental agency around that area spent tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars driving naval frigates and Coast Guard frigates and probably helicopters, I can't even remember,
Mhm.
To go and try and find those people. Okay, try and save people, sure. You know how many people could have been saved by putting that money into like food for people or housing,
Oh,
or like, it's just that part of it irks me the most, makes me the most like angry. And like,
yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
like, look, dude, you should, like, they should be given a bill. That company should be given a bill for the search and rescue operations from all the countries that were involved, because we shouldn't have to fit the bill for that. The
Yeah.
taxpayers. It's like,
It,
no, it's
so,
yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just another layer on the cake of
So,
bullshit that we have to swallow from the capitalist class.
so the search is kind of interesting to me because, like, they went missing, and then was, I don't know, 340. I don't know how many days it was before they confirmed the implosion, and
Mm-hmm.
the coast, like our Coast Guard went out, but our Navy was like suspiciously quiet about it, and they're like, "Yeah, the Navy will, we'll throw a few dollars at it, but we're not going at it too hard."
Yeah.
And everyone's like, "That's weird. Why isn't the Navy helping out the Coast Guard with this?" And then we found out
Yeah.
later on that they
Right.
heard a suspected
They already
implosion,
knew it.
and so the Navy did send a few things out. The Coast Guard sent a lot out. And then people got mad. They said, "Well, wait a minute. Why did they go out in the first place?" And I was like, "Listen, they heard what was a suspected implosion. That doesn't mean there was an implosion." So I
Right.
get it. Like, I get it. It's like, listen, we have no solid proof that the implosion happened. So we'll send some. We're not gonna send a lot out, but we'll send something out to see if we can find them.
Yeah.
And so I do get
Right.
that. But when you mentioned, I hadn't thought about this, but like the money that was spent on this and how it could have been spent on something a lot more productive, but that wouldn't have happened because we don't do that. I don't know if you
Right.
saw this, but it was few months back, and there was this lady testifying in front of the Senate. She was talking to not Joe Manchin, but what's his name? Oh, Senator John Kennedy. I call him Senator Foghorn Leghorn.
Foghorn Leghorn. Hell
yeah.
yes.
It's
Totally is.
So if you guys don't know who this guy is, he's the guy you probably know him from the meme of like, if you hate cops so much, the next time you're in trouble, call a crackhead. It's that guy. It's Senator John Kennedy,
Senator
who,
from Louisiana.
yeah, well, I think he's
Yeah,
actually from Alabama, and he ran for Senate in Louisiana because who cares, right? And so he just
Yeah.
moved to state. And the funny thing is, he went to college at like Yale or something. He went to like some super high class college. That's not his voice. He puts on that voice, so the bumpkins will vote for him. That's how little they think of Republican voters and everything. But
hilarious.
I saw this lady talking to him, and she was talking about the child tax credit, and of course he doesn't want to support expanding it and everything like that. And she told him, "Look, you guys say that cutting taxes is what we need to do to strengthen the economy to help people raise their station in life. Like, we started with the Reagan tax cuts, but we don't got to go back far. Let's just go to the Trump tax cuts and the Bush tax cuts. The last 20 years, we've been cutting taxes for 20 years. What do we have to show for it? Like, what have things gotten better? Like, you guys have told us for decades now that if we cut taxes on the rich and the power on the rich, it's going to trickle down to us." And she said something I'll never forget. She said, "I would love, I want to say fucking love, because like that's what I would say. I would fucking love if we gave 20 years into the child tax credit. If we spent 2 decades putting money into parents' pockets to help them raise their kids, and then see how that would work. Like, we've already tried it your way for 20 years. Let's try it our way." Shut him up immediately. He just moved on to something else because there's no argument against this, none whatsoever. And so, yeah, it pisses me off too, but it would never happen because that's just not how things work, apparently.
Yeah, they don't let it happen.
I don't get it. But All right, so let's go into like the actual like empathy, like that
Sure,
poisons you with the more money you get. So one of my
sure.
favorite authors and polemicists and speakers is Gore Vidal. And Gore Vidal, he grew up friends with Jackie Kennedy, Jackie Onassis at the time. So he became really good. The Gores were already a rich family anyway, or the Vidals and the Gores. And so he got to know the Kennedys really well. He was a really big fan of JFK until he became president. He's like, oh, okay, this guy's way dumber than I thought. But he would mention a lot about what he saw living amongst America's upper class and how all the money that you would accrue over the years turns you into something other than human. He said it was really difficult. And I think he explained about how, like, you ever read the Middle Ages or something, or actually any time period really with a monarchy, and the king would die. And then his kids would murder each other to get the crown.
Yeah.
And that was
Yep.
always super weird to me. It really, like, to this day, it's still bizarre. Like, okay, the old man is dead. You are willing to kill your brother to go from the number 3 spot to the number 1 spot? Like, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand that
Yep.
whatsoever. But Gorbachev said that, once you start accruing all this money and all this cash, nothing else matters to you anymore. It poisons your soul in a way that you can't possibly
Yep.
comprehend as a normal person. What have you seen about this?
Yeah. So there's just, this is anecdotal because I can't recall like the full thing off the top of my head, but like basically there's like a psychology to being rich. And it just, like you said, it changes who you are once you get that much money. You just start behaving so that you always, so that at the very least you never lose any more money, right? And obviously they always act in a way to get more money, but like they can't imagine being poor
Yeah.
anymore if they ever were,
Yeah,
right?
probably. Yeah.
Right, like if it's generational wealth, which most of it is, especially if it's a monarchy, that's the definition of generational wealth, right? um but it just changes, right? And it's you know it sucks a lot. And it can take good people and turn them rotten if for some reason they didn't have, they were just making $40,000 a year working in a factory or something, and then they won the lottery. Like, the chances of that person becoming a total dick, a lot less, because they started out with nothing comparatively. But it still can change you, right? And it just makes you act in a way to make sure you just keep furthering what you're doing to make sure you never go back to where you were. And it just poison it, like you said, it's poisonous. you know One of the, as far as like how it might, you know affect an individual person who is rich and wants to keep being rich, right? Like, you can also see it permeate out into just about everything else we do, right? Like, we're talking about even people that work at like a business that's like, not in, technically it might be a small business because it only has a few hundred employees, but like,
Mhm.
you know, let's say they're making, that company's pulling down 10 mil a year in revenue. Like, the people that are running that place, they're making a shitload of money. And like, they just keep acting that way, right? Because they're making that money. And what it basically does is their behavior when they're running the company, the executives and the middle management, you know anyone who's good in middle management eventually will quit or get fired because they're just not going to be the dick that they want them to be, right? But like, you know it destroys, empathy, capitalism in particular, and the capitalist class by making people compete against each other, right? For the table scraps
Yep.
of the capitalist class, right? We're fed constant capitalist propaganda about how if you want to succeed, you need to work hard and dedicate your life to your employer. There was a time where that was probably actually true, even though we were still all being taken advantage of.
Mhm.
You know, it was more true 50 years ago
Right.
than it is
Exactly.
today,
Yeah. When
right?
pensions existed
Like,
and stuff like that.
yeah, and when you could work one job at minimum wage and have a house and a car and kids, you can't do
It
that now.
isn't
um
isn't that crazy that that used to be a thing? Like it's
yeah,
like it's inconceivable to me. Like that world has never existed for us. Like even when we were born, that world was
right,
already well
it
on its
was
way
already
out.
gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And it makes people look at their fellow employees as enemies to their own success. in a lot of ways. And you're looked down upon by managers and executives if you don't work as much as possible. Like, everywhere I've worked, I've known that to be the case, with the exception of the union job I had, because you didn't have to do that. It was like, no, they didn't pay overtime. I mean, let me rephrase that. They paid OT if you worked it, but they just said you can't work overtime, and we were like, okay, sounds good. See you later. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, people don't want to work it if they don't have to most of the time, right?
Yeah.
If you need to work it because you can't have your material conditions met without it, that sucks.
That's
obviously
different story,
like,
though.
that's different, right? Yeah. So like, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, it just, the looking down upon thing is just, that's just the form of manipulation. That's all it is.
Yeah, the when you said that you're forced to look at your fellow workers as competition, the reality is they are. I mean, that's like that's
Yep.
just like that's one of the most poisonous aspects of capitalism, is that it
Yep.
atomizes you from not only from your community, which is like the most damage it does, but it atomizes you from your other workers. Like, you guys, like, in a society in which, like, let's say we started a business, and like we were building carriages or something, and we worked on this together, like every part of this carriage, like we were crafting ourselves, and we had pride in this product. It was part of us. But you fast forward to, I don't know, the Henry Ford days, and now, instead of you putting all of your love and work and teamwork into something, you spend 8 or 9 hours a day turning a knob. Like, that's all you do all day long. You don't give a fuck about the finished product. You don't care about your workers around you. You have your little your little hole that you're pegged into. And if you can screw over someone else, of course you are. And this is weird to think about. But I was in the Army, and I worked on 2 Army examples. It was weird. Didn't expect that. But when you mentioned how your fellow workers are your competition, the Army kind of instilled this in us too, and they were right. Because a lot of people would say the Army really wants you to re-enlist. Like, it's funny, they have like you sign your contract, and like every year, like a couple times a year, you'll have like re-enlistment breakfasts where they could bring you out. That's like, hey, here's some reasons for you to re-enlist. Here's a bonus you could have. Here's a school you can go to, a duty location. Like, they're begging for you to re-enlist. But one thing that they did say to sell it, and this was absolutely true, that let's say you and I are both in the Army, and we're both in the same squad, and there's a promotion for sergeant that we're both going for, and you make the cut, like you get promoted to sergeant. Now your supervisor looks good because he got you promoted to sergeant. And then you're not going to stay with me anymore. You don't stay with your buddies. They move you somewhere else because, it's weird. You're working for your friend now. So there are no downsides at all in the Army for someone below you getting promoted. It only benefits you. And it is not that way at all. It's like, it is not.
No.
Like, I never, all my time in the Army, I never had one leader who wasn't like deeply concerned with trying to get me promoted. Like, they wanted to really badly. But outside of the Army, it's not that way in the civilian world. Like, you are seen as a threat to your supervisor if you perform too well, because now your supervisor is worried about losing his job. And yeah, right. And it's fucked up, but it's weird that the Army has that right and like other places don't, because it's a government program, guaranteed pay, healthcare, and all that shit and everything. There's a lot of things they can learn from that. But you mentioned the middle management thing too, and that made me laugh. This is just another side Army example, is that you said people who are in middle management either quit or get fired. And I had a platoon leader of mine who was talking about a sergeant major. Sergeant major is like the highest enlisted rank. It's E9. And he said that he didn't trust any sergeant majors. He's like, because look, to be a sergeant major, you got to be in the Army roughly 20 years. Now, you can retire at 20 years. Why are you sticking around the Army? why are you doing this? Like, this just means that they're afraid of getting a job in the outside world, that they're too institutionalized in the Army. All the good guys at 20 years just get the fuck out. They don't stick around anymore. So that did make me laugh. But yeah, it is dark. And you mentioned the generational wealth and how it blinds people. This is something that I've always found weird. So I do get people who, like people who have survivorship bias, who didn't grow up with a lot of money, and then for some reason or another they're successful in a business or an investment, whatever. They get a lot of money and now they're in the upper class. And they look down on everybody in the lower class and said, well, look, I made it out. Why can't you? It's horrible
Yep.
logic, but I do get why they think it. I understand that.
Yeah.
What I don't understand is someone like Ben Shapiro, someone who was born into wealth and says,
Yeah.
I don't understand why these lazy fucks just don't get to work. Now, look, here's the thing.
It's such horseshit.
It's so weird. Now, here's the thing. Even if I believe that, let's say I was born into immense wealth and I grew up and I to my core, I believed if these folks just got off their asses and got to work, they can make it like me. I would never say it out loud. I would be too
Right.
embarrassed to say it out loud because of the obvious
Right.
implications of that. I don't get that at all.
Yeah, I think it's just part of being shielded like that your whole life, right? You don't understand how other people live and how they come up when you've never had to worry about your material conditions, right? You've never had to worry about where your next meal's coming from, if you're going to have a safe place to sleep tonight, if you're going to, be able to have health care, right? Or have, you have some issue, get your tooth taken care of if you got a bad tooth or whatever it is. Like they're just totally blinded in a sense that they just have never had to even think about it, right? And in some cases it's part of their shtick, right? They may not be true, but they may not be true believers in it. It's just they say that shit because they know that the people that listen to them and that pay them want to hear it. So like you have, again, capitalism coming in the backside of it, right? And making people say shit that they may not even believe in, but they get rich off of it.
Yeah. The grind set folks. And if you aren't up at 3 a.m. and going to the gym and like you aren't getting it done.
Yeah.
That's actually an even weirder thing to me too, because it's true. I like to play this game where I watch a conservative commentator and think, okay, do they buy this or not? And I have like a list set up of those who I think actually buy it and those who don't. Like
Sure.
yeah, like Ben Shapiro, I think he believes pretty much everything he says. I do. Like I think he is a true believer on most things. And I can even see it sometimes because every once in a while they'll say something that's actually not popular amongst the right wing. Like how Ben Shapiro is not a big Trump fan. Like he's not. Like he's always he's been dick riding DeSantis for a long time. Not the smart move. So it's like, okay, he actually has some principles with this, or with the Israel thing. Not with Israel thing, but Candace Owens with the Israel thing is weird too. But I think that's just because she's anti-Semitic. Honestly, it's weird how that works.
Yeah.
But like seeing people just say shit that whether they believe it or not, it really doesn't matter. It's just the after effects, like how it poisons society. But it is strange that most of his audience, or the audience for any of these conservative folks, are not rich people. They're regular ass people. They're working class folks, and they sit here and listen to people shit talking them, saying, well, you're poor or you're not wealthy and that's your fault, that's on you. And they're like, yep, you're right, yes sir, that's correct. That psychology is fascinating to me.
That's all part of like how capitalism tries to create individualism, right? And to put the onus on you as an individual, and whatever you have is because you deserve it, because you either did or didn't work hard enough, you did or didn't, go in on Saturday, whatever dumb shit you heard some asshole say to you about why you should do a thing that makes no sense to do. Like that's the mentality, and that's part of what capitalism does. It makes it separates people and isolates them and makes them look around, and and look, we're all, in some cases, well, let me rephrase that. So a lot of it is because capitalism doesn't function without poverty.
It doesn't, right? Can't work without it.
So they make people think that, they have that constant threat of poverty to manipulate people, right? Especially the ones that might like what Ben Shapiro has to say, right? And like it's just very hard. If I knew why people could believe that stuff and like not be able to take that step back and have a little more consciousness about what's actually happening, we could do a lot of good, right? If we could understand that psychology part of it, right? And maybe there are some people that do, but they aren't doing necessarily any good with it. But
Right? Yeah.
at any
What
rate,
good does it do?
like, it's like, we're all forced to participate in capitalism to survive, but the problem is some can't survive,
Yeah.
right? And when people can't survive or they barely survive, they become increasingly more isolated. And like you said, they're said to be lazy or weak or whatever. And they're blamed for their situation, whether they had a hand in it or not. Right. And it's like collectivism in the form of social programs, for example, that's shunned, right, across the board.
Yep.
And people using them because they need to survive are stigmatized, right? That's how it works. That's how capitalism furthers itself. It makes you compete against those people and say, look, you're going to be poor and you're going to be one of those people, right? Like that's how they say it, and that's how they treat marginalized people. And it's fucking terrible. But it's been happening forever, right? Like you go back to colonialism, when that started with, I know it started before the British, but like, because the Romans were doing it, but like the British and the French, and of course the United States have turned it into an art form, right? And like that's what it is. Colonialism is like the beginning of capitalism, right? Capitalism is built on top of that.
Yeah.
And they forever they've been doing that. It's just been, capitalism breeds individualism and propagandize socialism to be evil.
And they've done a great job with that
what
too.
they do. Yeah, they have. And
I mean, look, credit where credit's due. The propaganda campaign for 100 years against socialism, amazing. Like, bravo. Like that, if you could, they should teach a class on that, because think about what they're doing. It's like, all of these plans to give workers power and control the industry, that is bad. That is evil. That is just the government taking full control and all power. And we're the United States. We would never want something like that. Like, why would we want full power and control over you? That's why we're fighting communism. We're doing it for your good. Incredible. Incredible that works. And
off the charts.
It's like, I want to be mad, but it's actually really impressive.
It is. Well, and like, a lot of it started with the Cold War, right? After World War II, right? The CIA in particular, but like it existed before the CIA.
Yeah. They started like right after the Russian Revolution, basically. They started
right after 1917. Yep, basically. But like, it's all everyone that lived during the Cold War that's not I would say probably a Gen X or over 50 and older, and the generation is older than that. They all have some level of trauma from that propaganda from the Cold War, right? Like, when the Cold War ended, quote unquote, and the Berlin Wall fell, I was like 9 years old. So like that didn't
exactly.
I was just like, okay, the USSR existed and now it doesn't. Okay, whatever. Like Gorbachev's just the guy with the weird birthmark.
Yeah,
like, that's what it was to me at 10 years old, right? Like I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
But like people older than me, they've been traumatized by that propaganda, right? And it's like, you can see it if you look around and look at all the regime change that the United States has been a part of around the world. Like it's astounding how much of it there's been.
It's go ahead. Sorry.
It's almost, I don't have like a percentage because I've never looked at it, the numbers, but like a lot of the time the US is involved in some coup to get rid of a democratically elected socialist party.
Yep.
And then they put in place a right-wing authoritarian because they'll be friendly to the United States and the United States, quote unquote, interest in the area. Like it's off the chart. You see it everywhere in Latin America. You see they tried and failed in Albania in like the 40s and 50s because Albania was socialist for like nearly 50 years under Enver Hoxha. And like they tried a coup there, it didn't work. But like they've done it. If there's a wiki page about it, it's dozens and dozens and dozens of attempts the United States has been involved in.
It's incredible how often it happens. And my two favorite examples of this, or one is in reverse actually. The first one I think of is Cuba, in which like we all grew up learning that Fidel Castro was, Satan himself. That because Fidel Castro was the most evil man who's ever lived, and look at all the destruction and harm he caused. And then you read what happened. You're like, oh, the United States was backing a dictator named Batista, and Castro overthrew him. That's why we don't like Cuba. That's why we don't give a shit about the civil rights or anything like that. He didn't back our guy, and so now we lost control of this, island that made us a lot of money and our friends a lot of money. And then Iran is just like. So for those of you who don't know, and we've grown up, like our entire lives, we've heard, but that Iran is the world's greatest sponsor of terror, and everyone says that our problems with Iran started in 1979 with the Iran hostage crisis. That's what people say it all the time. I remember a buddy of mine was talking about this, and it's like, who's the guy with the eye patch? Dan Crenshaw. I was talking about
Crenshaw from Texas.
Yeah, it's like Pirate Crenshaw, and he's like, the Iranians started this trouble back then. And I remember talking to him, I was like, that is not when our trouble with Iran started. Our trouble with Iran started like in the 50s when they elected Mohammad Mossadegh, who had this crazy idea that the Brits and British Petroleum shouldn't control the oil reserves in Iran. That was his insane idea, that the money that was made from Iranian oil fields should be distributed to the Iranian people. And the Brits were too weak after World War II. They couldn't do anything about it. So they went crying to Uncle Eisenhower and said, hey, these brown folk, they aren't doing right by us. By the way, this guy wants to spread the money amongst the people. Sounds a lot like communism. And we were all over it. So we overthrew Mossadegh, put in the Shah, and then the Cultural Revolution or the Iranian Revolution, 1979. That's when our problem started, because we cannot stop doing it, and we've gotten away with it. Like, and Americans are just really bad at history anyway. Like they don't know shit about fuck when it comes to history, and so it's amazing how much we get away with it. Like, you're right, it totally is astounding.
It's unbelievable if you actually look into it. It's great. It's mind-boggling.
It is.
Honest. And the fact that Kissinger finally died, like, brought it to everybody's forefront a little more, like, to look into it. Like, I remember seeing a post on Instagram where someone was like, what? Similar to what we talked about before with the dead billionaires in the sub. What are you guys hating on Kissinger for? He died. That's really sad. And then you can see that post with a timestamp. And then you can see 9 minutes later, they come back and make another post and they go, never mind. It took them 9 minutes to go Google Henry Kissinger and realize, oh yeah, he fucking sucked.
Oh, God.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
Hilarious. Like, it's off the charts with that bullshit. Like,
it's dark, man. It's so
it really is.
The fact that Kissinger lived 100 years is depressing too. I mean, like, if anyone deserved to die an early death, it's Henry Kissinger. Like, and like he I don't know, he was rewarded. And this is the thing, he didn't even have to suffer the consequences of being a war criminal, like, as far as the public was concerned, till like the last 20 years or so. Like, I mean,
when it didn't matter.
Exactly. Like, he was being praised by like the Clintons and the Bushes and stuff, back in the 90s. Like, he was still seen as a national hero. It's like, bro, so people hated him when he was 84. Who gives a fuck? I mean, who cares?
By then, he's just sitting on piles of money. He doesn't care.
Yeah. God, it makes me sad that I don't believe in hell, because I would create it just for Henry Kissinger. Just like I would. Exactly. Like,
I hear you there.
It just, oh God. But when you were talking about people being told, like, they're poor and they're being told that, hey, you need to work harder. Like, yep, I sure do. You're sure right. It's weird to me because I think about guys who, speaking of like getting old, what getting with this is that you ever hear guys, it's a meme, so you've definitely heard it, but guys, it's like, looks like you got the easy work, cupcake. I just got off of a 96-hour shift and everything and stuff. And it's like, and they brag about how many hours they have at work. And it's like, That's nothing to brag about, man. Like
Yeah,
you,
it's
like,
not a flex.
it's not. It's not.
No.
Like you're spending all your time making
Yep.
someone else money, or hell, even
Yep.
making yourself money. Like let's say you're making yourself money, not someone else. You're away from your family, away from your
Yep.
friends, time you will never get back. You're gonna turn around one day, your kids will be 20 years old, and you spent all of your time at work. They're not gonna know anything about you, and your body's gonna break down. And guess what? You still won't be a millionaire. Sorry to break it to you,
Right.
not gonna
Yep.
happen. You're gonna waste.
Yeah.
And I think people ultimately do realize this too late, though. Like when you're 65, 70 years old, you spent,
Yep.
50, 60 hours a week, every 50 weeks a year at work, and you're still just barely making it. And by then it's too late. But by then it's too late. And I guess you have to
Right.
hold on to it because you don't want to admit that you dedicated your entire life to a falsehood.
Right.
Like that's my only guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned it, especially if you're working for somebody else. It's like your excess labor value is going to that person for doing nothing. They have
Yep.
done absolutely nothing. The owners of the company, whether it's a private equity firm, which in a lot of cases, private equity firms own shitloads of companies in the United States in particular. Um, those guys don't earn anything. Typically, those are all rich white old dudes who use their money to buy companies and then break them apart, or slash all the staff to make them as profitable as possible, quote unquote, and then sell them 5 years later, 10 years later, whatever the case is. Like they're using your excess labor value, manipulating you into thinking that you're going to get part of that, right? You work hard for us and you're going to see the benefits of it. And it's like, no, that's just simply not true, right? Like, sure, you might get paid a little more, but it's like, it's not worth, like you said, it's not worth the time away from your family. It's not worth the toll it takes on your body, either mentally and or physically. It's just not, it's not worth it, right? There are more important things to do than to make somebody else a shitload of money.
And
It's just the way it is.
And the really weird thing too is that you mentioned the fact that hey, this is just some rich fuck sitting on his ass all day collecting a check from your labor. They're like, well, yeah, he deserves it. Like he bought into the company. Like what? Like he spent X amount of dollars on this, 15 years ago, which entitles him to being paid in perpetuity from my labor. Like, and they're
Yeah,
perfectly
right,
fine with that. Perfectly fine.
right. Yeah. Yeah, it's part of the grift of capitalism, right? That's just what it is. And like, you know, it's they're sitting like they didn't do anything for that money in particular, or if they did,
Even
it
if they
was
did,
most
yeah.
likely generational wealth, most
Mhm.
likely, right? But even still, it's like you're not getting the benefit of it regardless. Like it's just you're not. It's just you're not. And the fact that people do it anyway for a number of reasons, but a lot of it is because they won't have health insurance if they don't.
Yep, that's fucked
And
up.
that's a whole nother 3-hour podcast just about health insurance in the United States. But like that's people want to talk about countries being free. America's the most free.
Oh yeah.
Like no,
No, it
go
just
to any country that you don't have your healthcare tied to your job. All those people are infinitely more free than someone who has to have a job to have healthcare, because
inconceivably more free. Yeah.
it makes people stay in jobs they don't like. It makes people stay in jobs that are bad for their body. It makes people stay in jobs where they're sexually harassed, where they're discriminated against for being anything but straight and white, like, and a male probably. And like that's none of it. We're not free comparatively to the people that don't have to sit through that shit.
No,
Like
no.
we're just not.
It's I we're not going to do a 3-hour talk on healthcare, but I just want to do like a 45-second thing on it. It's just that
Sure.
healthcare, universal healthcare is the biggest no-brainer in American politics to me. Like I am shocked, like actually shocked that we don't have it, because there are two types of arguments against universal healthcare. There are bad ones and there are worse ones. There's no third category. Like there's
no good one
at all. And and the stuff they've been saying the same shit for my entire life. Like 30 years, I've been hearing people say, well, universal healthcare sounds good and all, but man, those wait times, that'll get you. As if you can go to the hospital tomorrow morning and like, yep, see me forever I want. Yeah, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Like you're going to be waiting just like
Yeah.
everybody. It's insane.
Yeah. I mean, I have several examples of that in particular. Like when I was I don't know, 20 years ago, I had some issue and I went to the doctor and they were like, okay, we're going to give you an MRI and then you're going to meet with the doctor in like a month and a half to get the results.
Yeah.
And like, I was like, I said, no, that's not what's going to happen. And they were like, what? I was like, I just got an MRI because I thought I had a fucking stroke. I'm not waiting a month and a half for a doctor to look at it and have another fucking stroke. Like I didn't end up having a stroke, fortunately, but like I told them flat out, I said, no, I'm not, I'm not waiting a month and a half. And they were like, well, I guess we could squeeze you in here in between these appointments. And I was like, yeah, yes, you will. But like, you know, they've done the same thing to like, and believe me, like I come from I am privileged just because of like having a good upbringing and having good jobs. So like, not woe is me, but like I understand exactly what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I have health insurance and it does that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
There's people that don't even have health insurance who can't even get to the point where they get denied or told to wait. They just flat out don't go.
Yeah, it's
Just
that's
horrible.
usually what happens. That's usually what happens. And people don't factor that in that, yeah, if you either don't have health insurance or you have health insurance that's so shitty that, you know, you're spending a ton of money every time you go anyway, you're just not going to go to the doctor. And a minor issue you're going to put off until it becomes a major issue. And now it's going to be a catastrophic cost or even kill you. And you could, you know, head all of that off if we had decent health insurance. And like I'm in the army, so I have a VA healthcare,
Okay.
which is free, and I live like 10 minutes from the VA hospital, and the VA is amazing. Like I know that it got shit on for a long time, but they have cleaned this operation up really well. You can be seen really quickly. It's one of the most efficient hospitals I've ever seen. And I just like, man, why doesn't everybody have this? It is outrageous that, you know, people in the military deserve this, but nobody else does. It's absolutely bullshit. And we kind of got off track with the whole people collecting checks for not doing anything. But I thought about the first run in I ever had with Marxism was in church. I was probably 10, 12 years old.
Okay.
And we had this missionary. I don't know where he went, but he was talking about how he was in this, like, it was like a third world nation or something. And he had like a little shack he had built or whatever around the indigenous population. And he had you know, this tract of land outside of his shack. And so he hired a bunch of the native population there to come help him like plant food for the next year. And so, you know, he paid them whatever it was, and they came to plant the food. And then fall came by, and he went out to pick the food, and all the natives were there picking the food, you know, to take home with them. And he goes, "Wait,
Right.
what are you guys doing?" They go, "Well, we planted it, so we're picking it now." And I heard that story, and I didn't know anything about Marxism or anything like that. But I remember thinking, I can see why they thought that. I was like, that actually does make sense. If I planted this food, you know, 5 months from now, I'm going to come back and pick this food. You gave me a coin. Right, that's great. But I mean, I planted this food. I'm entitled to this shit.
Right.
And it was weird because it's like, I would have never thought about that because of our whole, I own this land. So whatever's on this land is mine. That doesn't make any sense. But that's not how humans innately operate. Like, we've been brainwashed into thinking of this. And it reminds me of a Dave Chappelle joke. Oh God, I hate that Dave Chappelle has turned into the person he is. You know, it's like, it happens, but it sucks, right? It's so bad. But he told this joke about when the Americans bought Manhattan from the Native Americans. And you know, we're all told that, you know, they bought Manhattan for like $28 or something like that. And so it turns out that they didn't swindle them like the natives thought they were getting a good deal, because they asked them, is like, hey, can we buy this land? They're like, what are you talking about buying land? Like, what the fuck? He's like, and David Chappelle said, like, what, to them that didn't make sense. I was like, yeah, you can buy the land. What, you want to buy some of the sky too? Like, like it was ridiculous. It's just weird how we've grown up to just accept this as normal when it doesn't have to be this way, but we've entrenched in it so long that it's hard to break out of it.
Right. Well, and the fact that, you know, well, let me start over. So like what Marx did was study other other people that had written things, and anthropologists that examined in particular the way the Native Americans were living. And so the idea of collectivism and communalism, right, that he wasn't novel in that idea. He was novel in that he applied it to industrial society, right? And so he learned about it and then applied it to what the current situation was for Britain and Europe at the time, right? And it's like the you know you can't, like, the idea to me, like you said, like we're gonna own the land and no one else, and now it's my land, right? And it's like, of course they thought it was absurd that they would own, that they could buy the land from them, right? Because they just didn't live that way,
Yeah.
right? They lived in harmony with the land, right? And like, we're much better conservationists than Europeans ever would be, right? Any settler colonialist, like, generally aren't going to be better conservationists than the native population because they've lived there forever. They know
Yeah.
what it takes to have a sustainable world,
And you
right?
don't
To
have
have a
any like
sustainable society.
cultural tie to or like emotional tie to the land either. Like you just showed up there. Like it's just,
Right. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
it it,
It's really weird.
it is. Fuck, I was gonna say about the colonialism aspect of it, and that how you said capitalism is kind of built on colonialism. Also, colonialism actually comes after capitalism too, because it has to expand.
It's both.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a weird like
Yep.
Ouroboros. It's the snake eating its own tail,
Yep.
happening over and
Yeah.
over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. And if, you know, we're wading into decolonial theory now, which is fine. I know a little bit about it, but like the idea that, to make a change for the better, you have to decolonize first, right? You have to liberate people first before you can move on to something better. Because if you just try and make a change to the way capitalism is functioning without acknowledging especially in the Western Hemisphere, the people who had their land stolen and were genocided and continue to be genocided because of it, and not reconcile that, you're not making it any better, really, right? Like, so you're not going to have that change. Like, there is no reforming capitalism. It has to
No.
fucking go.
Yeah, it's
In order to do that, you have to liberate first, right? You have to
yeah.
liberate the native populations. You have to liberate the marginalized people in society, right? Like the class reductionism, that's what Marx did, right? He made everything, at least in the industrial world, the capitalist class, right? And the proletariat, the working class. And that's okay to a point, but that doesn't address the intersectional things that need to be addressed in order for people to be liberated, right? It just doesn't do it. It can help, but you also need to do that liberation layer. You got to dig down, drill down another layer or two or three to get to the point to actually start helping people.
Yeah, yeah. And folks, this is why social democracy is not the answer. This is precisely why social democracy is not the
Yep.
answer. Now, I don't know about you, but I mean, like a lot of us, we really got into this like in the like 2014, 2016 era, like when Bernie Sanders became popular.
Mm-hmm.
And back in
Yep.
those days, I was like, okay, this he called it democratic socialism. We all know better, but
Right.
whatever. It's like, okay, like this Nordic model where, we still have a capitalist economy with strong social safety nets. That seems to be paying off big dividends for these folks overseas. So, why don't we do that? Well, that's a good stepping stone, I guess, but that doesn't solve the actual problem because,
Right.
all they do is export the most pernicious aspects of capitalism to the global south. Like other people are the ones
Yep.
who are, suffering under the weight of capitalism and being
Right.
paid 9 cents a day to make
Yep.
your sweatshirts, and like that's the problem there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. It really comes back to, like, I like the way you phrased it. And I was actually thinking about this earlier today. Like, colonialism is, Marx talks about the contradiction being proletariat versus capitalist class, right? There is another contradiction that also needs to be addressed, and I said it earlier, but that's the colonization part, right? And like the expansion of the market, especially in the with the Industrial Revolution in England in the 1800s, right, when Marx was writing what he was writing, they needed to expand so that they could keep getting more resources to keep producing things, right, keep producing, and while they were doing that, they were also colonizing places, right, and they were trying to spread Christianity. There were missionaries who are nothing more than colonialists. um, they're expanding all of that all over the globe, trying to take all the resources. In some case, we know what happened in the United States, where they actually took people, right, took slaves, took them to the United States to build the United States, right, like, and other places, Haiti, it happened a lot of places more than the United States, but like those two things go hand in hand. They wanted to expand the production. In order to do that, they had to do the colonization. And then once they got there, they had to put the capitalism back on top of the colonization, or it wasn't going to work, because they would have just been kicked out. So it is, it doesn't take a whole lot of study, if you're familiar with some of it, to start understanding where the actual problems lie.
Yeah.
Right? Like
I
the
mean,
root of things.
maybe not for you, but like a lot of people, I don't know. You've talked about this before, and some people just can't connect the dots. They just can't. Like you lay it all out in front of them, and they're like, "I don't get it. Like I don't understand." So I don't know. I've run across this before, so I'm just saying that. Um,
Yeah.
you mentioned I don't know, this came just popped in mind where you talked about Haiti and
Mm-hmm.
how slavery didn't just happen in the southern United States. And honestly, the only reason it didn't happen in the northern, I was talking about this with some video I made, but why, like, oh yeah, it's about Nikki Haley and her,
Ugh,
dodging the reason. I know, right? What a fucking coward. It's just so
idiot.
it's
Yeah.
but like I was saying, like why the Civil War happened is because the South wanted to protect slavery and everything. And
Yep.
that the North was upset because they were at an economic disadvantage because they didn't have slaves. And it's like, well, the only reason that the North didn't have slaves was because the climate and the soil was not conducive to making cash crops like the South was. Like, if it were,
Mm.
believe me, the North would have had slaves
Oh,
too.
they would have
It's
had
just
it.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
there
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
just no market for it in the North. But you're right. The slavery wasn't just in the Southern United States. Like South America and Central America, the Caribbean,
Yep.
there were way more slaves that went to those areas than the United States had a much smaller percentage. Yet still, as far as I know, we are the only country that went to war to protect slavery. Like we're the only ones. Everyone else, you know, found some way. Well, I guess Haiti kind of there was
Yeah.
Haitian Revolution, like where the slaves rebelled, and the only
Haiti.
successful slave revolt in
Yeah.
human history. Badass, but
Pretty much. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Haiti in particular, I was just looking into Haiti like a month ago or so. As I've done a couple of videos about French colonialism, and like just looked into it and just read what the wiki page says about it, but like went through it kind of methodically and went like, okay, started here, then went to this page, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, like Haiti in particular, the end result of the slave revolt was Haiti paying a debt to
Huge
France for
debt.
like over a
Huge.
hundred years. Do you know about the
Yes,
indemnity debt?
huge, massive.
Ridiculously insane. But like before they could even get to that point, like you had all of the major colonial people. You had France, Spain, Britain, all involved in that. They were all like, and some of them were working with the working with the slaves. Some of them were working with the indigenous population of Haiti before, like, because there was also indigenous people there before the Europeans and the slaves were brought, right? So like they were at some points, one of them was working with the slaves to try and I think Spain was working with the slaves for a while to try and kick Britain and France out, and then they switched sides and started working with it is just an unbelievable mess of just colonial horseshit. And like the fact that they were able to revolt and win and like kick them out, only to have France come back, like, I don't know, 20 years later with warships in the harbor and tell them, You're gonna pay us now
Now,
for
yeah,
all the
pay up.
lost
Yeah, yeah.
pay us for the lost property.
Yep.
And what they mean is the lost slaves is what
Mhm.
they meant by lost property. Like,
Yeah.
and they paid over like $100 million.
It was yeah, yeah.
Insanity.
Yeah.
And to make it even more gross, if it could get more gross, the United States Citibank in like somewhere in like the early 1900s or mid 1900s bought the debt from France, or they bought the debt that Haiti was supposed to pay to France. They bought it from France to keep collecting payments from Haiti.
Oh, I didn't know that part. Yikes. That's, oh
It's
God,
fucking
that's
horrible.
gross.
It's
That's
so
even gross.
gross.
Oh, that's gross.
It's
Ah,
so
crap. I
gross.
thought we could lay this all on France's feet, but we're
No.
God damn.
It wouldn't be colonialism without the United
No, you're
States
right.
involved.
You're right. And if I remember correctly, like after the slave rebellion, a lot of the European nations like wouldn't trade with Haiti either. So like it was hard for them to like even make money to pay off this debt. And
they're still impoverished today because of it.
yeah, yeah.
They're like one of the poorest countries around because of it.
It is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. It definitely, like around the world, I don't know, but Western Hemisphere, it definitely is. And so there's a book that I want to recommend, but I can't quite. It's a book called The Black Jacobins, and it's about the Haitian Revolution and all about their general. I think I can't pronounce it in French. Toussaint Louverture. I can't remember. Like
Louverture,
I can't. Yeah, in French and everything, but. It talks about like all the. I found the book very boring. That's why I say That's why I can't say I recommend. Like it's a very important historical document and everything about the Haitian Revolution. I learned a lot. I learned about they had this weird, like, I guess it's not weird. It's kind of par for the course of human history, I guess. Unfortunately, they had this like racial caste system that was more complex than ours. Like in the United States, you had white people, you had like mixed people, and you had black people. That's pretty much. And then we had levels of mix. That's true. Like you had what they had mulattoes, quadroons, octoroons, names like that. Real gross sounding till we say it a lot today. But in Haiti, they had like 38 different names for like how much black blood you had. And like you had different levels of rights dependent upon that, which we did not have here in the States. Like if you were 1/4 black, you were black. You got treated like every other black person. And so, but in Haiti, you had like free people of color and based on how much black ancestry you had, and it was pretty complex. I know it was a fascinating book, but learning like how Haiti was mistreated, just by the fact that they didn't want to be slaves anymore, like the horror, like how dare they? It's just it's fucking wild, man. That's the sad thing about human history. We say it's about American history. It's just human history, really. Like it's just it's like, speaking of memes, when people like say, "Oh, this is America. We're not like this." And you open history books, like, okay, I guess we are. It's like it's just and the weird thing is, like, to bring it to a close, is like our whole topic was about empathy and everything. And it's the weird like paradox of human beings that we are capable of some of the, most kind, loving, and altruistic, helpful activities that you could imagine. But also, Jesus Christ! Like, have you ever heard of the show called Yu Yu Hakusho? It's an anime called Yu Yu Hakusho. Well, there's this segment in there where the main character is a spirit detective. Like he's there to protect humans from demons, and he finds out that the spirit detective that worked before him quit, and he quit because he walked in on these people viewing a video, and it was these humans that had kidnapped the demon and they were torturing the demon, and they were watching this VHS tape, and the VHS tape was called Chapter Black, and all it was like 10,000 hours of the most horrible activities mankind has committed. And he watched the tape and he said, "Fuck humans." He's like, "I'm done. I'm not protecting them. They are not worth my time. I'd rather work with the demons." And it's actually a pretty, because like, people are capable of horrendous activities, and history is full of them. And it's weird that, I know it's trite when they say that, what is it? The history bends towards justice or whatever. And I guess that is kind of true in a lot of ways. Life definitely does seem to get better. Like you go back 100,000 years, all right, life's a lot better than it was back then, but it's rough. But I I wish that there was just more love and more empathy. I just do, and and
Yeah,
capitalism is not doing us any favors, and trying to spread it.
it's
It's just not.
definitely not. It's definitely not. And what the thing that I liken it anyway to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like that's part of motivation, what motivates people to do what they do, right?
Hmm.
And like if you can't if you don't have your physiological needs met, right?
Yep,
Food, water, clothing, shelter, you won't be able to get to the next level,
no
right?
chance. Yep.
To have your security needs met because you're constantly having to worry about where your next meal will come from, right? Or whatever. It's not, maybe you have food but you don't have clothing, or you have
Hmm.
clothing but you don't have shelter, right? The point is you can't get to the next step because you're constantly worrying about your material conditions, right? And so like the steps in the pyramid above food, water, clothing, above security are the ones you're talking about: belongingness and love, esteem, and self-actualization, right? Like most people can't get there, and they're not attainable when you're constantly struggling for
True.
the bottom two layers. And I think that's part of what we see in the United States in particular with the rise of the like fascism from the right kind of thing is they're using that as a weapon, right? You saw Trump say it a lot, right? And or insinuate it, right? Or sometimes flat out say it. But like, look, he would say things like, well, he'd use the dog whistle, like, you don't have what you want because the immigrants taking it from
Oh yeah.
you, right? And that's
He
that's
he
what he
said
that's the
he
weaponization of the bottom layer, right?
Yeah,
Pitting
he was
people
saying
against
stuff
each
like,
other.
white people are getting sent to the back of the line for COVID vaccines. It's just like just making up shit out of nowhere.
Just
Yeah.
total
Just
horseshit.
like
Yeah, just utter nonsense. Yeah.
it, it's the with the right and the fascism and everything. You're correct. You're 1,000,000% correct, because like, it's you can only go one of two directions. If you see that, hey, I'm suffering and I don't have enough to take care of myself, and neither do my friends around me, you can go to socialism or barbarism. And like, a lot of Americans have chosen barbarism. And
Yep.
it's weird that I I don't get this. Like, even I was a conservative for a long time, and it's like I don't understand how you can just revel in the performative sociopathy of conservatism. I don't get it. Like, they're proud of themselves. Like, yeah, I remember telling a friend of mine, I was talking about, it was before Trump got elected, or maybe like right after he got elected, and I was talking about how Trump was just like saying this vicious, like, stuff about immigrants and everything, and how terrible it is. And I was like, what do
Mm-hmm.
you think your average like Guatemalan immigrant like is? Like, what do you think this person is fleeing from a collapsing government? They don't have enough food to take care
Yep.
of their kids. They're trudging hundreds of miles on foot a lot of times. They're not
Yep.
here to commit crime against you. They're just trying to live.
Right.
And I was like,
Yeah.
these people could die on the trip. And he goes, boo hoo. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? How could you say
Yeah.
boo hoo to like a
Ugh.
mother carrying her baby across the country of Mexico just to come pick
Right.
strawberries somewhere? Like, what is
Right.
going on? And I always say this. I love conservatives are just easy to clown on, so it's not even like I get a lot of joy out of it. It's just how can you not? But I talk
Yeah.
about how they always talk about how they're only interested in caring about themselves and their family, and that's I said, listen, there's the way we judge maturation in human beings is very simple. It boils down to how many people do you give a fuck about? That's what maturity is. A
Sure.
baby only cares about the baby. The baby doesn't is barely
Right.
aware
Right.
anyone else exists.
Yeah.
If the baby's hungry, if the baby's thirsty, the baby's tired, if the baby just
Yep.
wants attention, it doesn't give a shit if it's 3:30 in the morning. That baby's gonna scream and cry and get
Yes.
that attention and that food. It's like, well,
Yep.
I'll wait a few hours till mom and dad. No, no, the baby's crying. I need it now. Then you become a
Yep.
toddler and you realize, okay, I got these two folks here. They seem pretty cool. They're feeding me, taking care of me. I miss them when they're gone.
Yeah.
I might have a sibling or two. They annoy me, but I kind of like them. And then you become like a teenager, and you're like, okay, I have a whole community and society. I have friends I care about. you get older, you've learned about, people in different countries, animals. Like, you start to care about more and more people. But
Right.
your conservative is stuck in the infant phase. I care about me and literally nobody
Right.
else. That's nothing
Yep.
to be proud of. I don't know how they don't
Yeah.
see this. I genuinely don't.
I don't either. I don't either. I think you've said it earlier too. Sometimes it's just human nature, unfortunately. And in other cases, they were never like they were like taught that, right? You have to be taught hate, right? You don't innately
You
hate
kind of
hate
do.
people, right?
Yes.
You
Yeah.
have to be taught to hate, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, they learned it from their parents or their relatives, or whatever nonsense they wherever they got it from, right? It's a learned thing, and it's sad, right? It's I don't know, it's
It
hard.
is. Well, we're doing our best. Well, we're doing to see what we can do. So Kraig, tell us where we can find more of your stuff. You want to plug?
Sure, thanks. So yeah, on Instagram, it's at dystopian_grift. Um, you can find my podcast, Voices from the Left, on anywhere you can find podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all of those. Um, those are the main places to find me. So otherwise, if you can find me on Instagram. If you have a question or can't find the show or whatever, just send me a message, and we'll go from there. But yeah, it's been good. Appreciate your time.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, thank you.